Karoline Leavitt adjusted the strap of her handbag as she stepped out of the taxi. The evening air was crisp, and the faint hum of excitement buzzed around her. She looked up at the grand entrance of the venue, its glass doors reflecting the golden glow of the chandeliers inside. It was an exclusive political event, one that people in her line of work dreamed of attending. As a young journalist with a knack for uncovering stories others overlooked, Karoline had worked hard to earn her spot in the VIP section. Tonight, she wasn't just another face in the crowd. She was part of something bigger. The invitation had arrived in her inbox 2 weeks ago, and she'd read it over a dozen times since. "Dear Ms. Leavitt," it began, congratulating her on her recent investigative piece about grassroots activism. Her editor had called it groundbreaking. Her colleagues had called it brave. But Karoline didn't think of herself as extraordinary. She simply believed in asking questions until she found answers. And now here she was, standing outside a place where those answers might be hiding in plain sight. Inside, the room was alive with energy. Politicians mingled with donors, reporters jotted down notes, and waitstaff weaved through the crowd carrying trays of sparkling drinks. Karoline spotted Michelle Obama across the hall, surrounded by admirers. The former First Lady radiated warmth and confidence, drawing people in like moths to a flame. Karoline felt a pang of admiration. There was something magnetic about Michelle, her ability to make everyone feel seen, valued, even in a room full of strangers. "Excuse me, ma'am." A voice broke through her thoughts. Karoline turned to see a young man in a black suit standing beside her. His name tag read Ethan. He gestured toward the seating chart near the stage. "Are you Karoline Leavitt?" "Yes, that's me," she replied, smiling politely. "I'm sorry, but there seems to have been a mix-up with your seat assignment. Could you please follow me?" "A mix-up?" Karoline frowned but followed him anyway. They walked past rows of chairs, each adorned with a small placard bearing the name of its designated occupant. When they reached the VIP section, Ethan stopped and pointed to an empty chair. "This is your seat," he said, his tone apologetic. "But I've been instructed to move you elsewhere." "What do you mean?" Karoline asked, her voice rising slightly. "I was told I'd be seated in the VIP area." "I understand, ma'am, but there's been a change. Someone else has been assigned this seat." Before she could argue further, 2 security guards appeared, their expressions unreadable. One of them gestured for her to step aside. "Please come with us," he said firmly. Karoline hesitated, feeling a flush of embarrassment creep up her neck. Everyone nearby was watching now, some whispering behind their hands. She glanced back at Michelle Obama, who was still chatting animatedly with her circle of admirers. Reluctantly, she allowed herself to be led away from the VIP section and toward the back of the room where a cluster of less desirable seats remained unoccupied. As she settled into her new spot, frustration simmered beneath the surface. What kind of mistake could warrant such treatment? She scanned the room, trying to identify the person who had taken her place. That's when she saw her, a tall woman with perfectly styled hair and an expensive-looking dress. Her nameplate read, Susan Harper. Karoline didn't recognize the name, but something about the way Susan carried herself suggested wealth and influence. 5 minutes later, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. A murmur rippled through the crowd as staff members began gathering near the exit. Karoline watched in confusion as Ethan, the same young man who had escorted her earlier, was handed a folder and then ushered toward the door along with several others. Within moments, every single staff member involved in managing the event was being fired on the spot. No explanations were given, only curt instructions delivered through headsets. Chaos erupted backstage. Waiters abandoned their trays, leaving half-empty glasses scattered across tables. Ushers exchanged panicked glances as they were handed termination letters. Even the event coordinator, a frazzled woman named Lisa, was not spared. She tried to protest, her voice trembling with disbelief, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. By the time Michelle Obama took the stage, the mood in the room had soured. Karoline leaned forward in her seat, her mind racing. Something about the entire situation felt off. Why would someone go to such lengths to remove her from the VIP section? And why fire the entire staff so abruptly? None of it made sense. As Michelle began her speech, her words washing over the audience like a bomb, Karoline couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that she had stumbled into something far more complicated than a simple seating mishap. When the event finally ended, Karoline lingered near the exit, hoping to catch Ethan or Lisa before they left. She spotted Ethan heading toward the parking lot, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Wait!" she called out, jogging to catch up with him. "What just happened back there?" Ethan glanced over his shoulder, his eyes darting nervously. "I can't talk about it," he muttered, quickening his pace. "Please," Karoline pressed. "You owe me that much after what you put me through." He paused, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "Look, I don't know all the details, okay? But there are people, powerful people, who wanted certain things done tonight. Things changed last minute, and anyone who questioned it got canned. That's all I can say." Before Karoline could respond, Ethan hurried away, disappearing into the night. She stood there for a moment, her heart pounding. Powerful people, last-minute changes. It sounded like the setup for a conspiracy, but deep down she knew Ethan wasn't lying. Whatever had happened tonight, it wasn't random. Someone had orchestrated it, and Karoline intended to find out who. Back in her apartment later that evening, Karoline poured herself a cup of tea and opened her laptop. She typed Crestwood Associates into the search bar, remembering the name from snippets of conversation she'd overheard earlier. The results were sparse, but one thing stood out. Crestwood specialized in high-stakes consulting for politicians and corporations. Their website was sleek and minimalist, offering little information beyond vague promises of strategic solutions and innovative approaches. Karoline leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen. If Crestwood was involved, then this was no ordinary scandal. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved. And Karoline Leavitt had never backed down from a challenge. The next morning, Karoline met Mia Rodriguez at a small diner on the outskirts of town. The place was quiet, with only a few customers scattered around. Mia was easy to spot. She had short, jet-black hair streaked with neon blue, and her laptop was already open on the table in front of her. She looked up as Karoline approached and gave a quick nod. "Thanks for coming," Karoline said, sliding into the booth across from her. "I know this is risky." Mia shrugged, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. "Risky is my middle name. Besides, if what you're saying about Crestwood is true, then someone needs to expose them." Karoline handed over a USB drive containing all the files she'd gathered so far. "This is everything I have. Emails, screenshots, notes from my conversation with Rachel Monroe. It's not much, but it's a start." Mia plugged the drive into her laptop and began sifting through the data. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as lines of code appeared on the screen. After a few minutes, she leaned back in her seat and let out a low whistle. "Okay, this is interesting. Most of this stuff is encrypted or redacted, but I can work with it. Give me a day or two and I'll see what I can dig up." As they talked, Karoline couldn't help but notice how calm Mia seemed despite the gravity of the situation. There was a confidence about her that made Karoline feel a little less alone in this fight. Still, the weight of what she was uncovering pressed heavily on her chest. She knew they were stepping into dangerous territory. Later that afternoon, Alex called with an update. He'd managed to trace the anonymous email Karoline had received to a server located in an office building downtown. But when he tried to dig deeper, he hit a wall. Whoever was behind it had covered their tracks well. "It's like they wanted you to find the server," Alex said, his voice tense. "They're sending a message, Karoline. Be careful." She nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "I will. Did Daniel have any luck with his contacts?" "Not yet, but he's working on it. In the meantime, we need to focus on what Mia finds. If Crestwood really is manipulating public perception, we need proof, and fast." Over the next few days, Karoline threw herself into the investigation. She spent hours poring over old news articles, looking for patterns or connections between major events and Crestwood Associates. At first, it seemed like a dead end. But then she noticed something strange. During several high-profile speeches and rallies, key figures who had criticized certain politicians or policies suddenly disappeared from public view shortly afterward. Some retired quietly, others vanished entirely. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but the pattern was there. And every time Crestwood's name appeared in the fine print, listed as consultants, advisors, or event coordinators, Karoline felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just about rearranging seating charts or managing PR disasters. Crestwood was playing a much bigger game, one that involved controlling narratives and silencing dissent. Meanwhile, Mia worked tirelessly to decrypt the files on the USB drive. Late one night, she called Karoline with news. "I found something big," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. Crestwood has been running a program called Operation Spotlight. It's designed to manipulate public opinion using advanced algorithms and psychological profiling. They're targeting social media trends, news outlets, even live events. Basically, they're rewriting reality without anyone noticing. Karoline's heart raced. "Do you have evidence?" Enough to raise some eyebrows. But here's the kicker. They're planning something huge. There's mention of an upcoming event where world leaders will be manipulated into signing agreements that benefit Crestwood's clients. Think staged coups disguised as diplomatic negotiations. "This is insane," Karoline muttered, pacing her apartment. "If we don't stop them, they could change the course of history." "We need to act fast," Mia agreed. "But we also need to be smart. These people aren't amateurs. If they catch wind of what we're doing, they won't hesitate to shut us down. For good." The next day, Karoline, Alex, Mia, and Daniel held an emergency meeting at a secluded cabin outside the city. It was owned by Daniel, who insisted it was the safest place to discuss their plans. As they gathered around a wooden table cluttered with laptops and papers, the gravity of their mission settled over them. "We need to infiltrate Crestwood's headquarters," Daniel said, breaking the silence. "That's where we'll find the smoking gun, the hard evidence we need to take them down." "And how exactly do you propose we do that?" Alex asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's not like we can just walk in and ask for a tour." "That's where Mia comes in," Daniel replied, turning to her. "If anyone can hack into their security system, it's you." Mia nodded thoughtfully. "I can disable the cameras and override the locks, but it won't be easy. Their systems are state-of-the-art, and if they detect any interference, they'll know we're onto them." "What about guards?" Karoline asked, her stomach tightening at the thought. Daniel pulled out a blueprint of the building. "There's a service entrance on the east side. If we time it right, we can slip in unnoticed. Once inside, we split up. Mia and Alex head to the server room to download the data while Karoline and I search for physical documents." It was a risky plan, but none of them could think of a better alternative. They spent the rest of the day preparing, reviewing every detail and rehearsing their roles. By the time night fell, they were ready, or as ready as they could be. Following evening, the group drove to the outskirts of the city, parking a safe distance from Crestwood's headquarters. The building loomed ahead of them, its sleek glass facade reflecting the moonlight. Everything was eerily quiet, save for the hum of distant traffic. Mia got to work immediately, pulling out her laptop and connecting to the building's Wi-Fi network. Her fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard as she bypassed firewalls and disabled security cameras. Within minutes, the coast was clear. "Let's go," she whispered, motioning for the others to follow. They slipped through the service entrance and split up as planned. Inside, the air was cool and sterile, the kind of environment designed to make visitors feel both insignificant and intimidated. Karoline and Daniel crept down a dimly lit hallway, their footsteps muffled by thick carpeting. Every now and then they paused to listen for signs of movement, but the building remained eerily silent. In the server room, Alex and Mia worked frantically to extract the data they needed. Files upon files filled the screens, detailing everything, from psychological profiles to covert operations. Mia copied them onto multiple drives, ensuring they wouldn't lose the information if something went wrong. Meanwhile, Karoline and Daniel searched offices and filing cabinets for anything that might corroborate their findings. Just as they were about to give up, Daniel spotted a locked drawer in the corner of a desk. Using a small toolkit, he picked the lock and opened it. Inside was a stack of documents labeled Operation Spotlight. "We've got it," he murmured, handing the papers to Karoline. But before they could celebrate, alarms blared throughout the building. Red lights flashed, bathing the halls in an ominous glow. Someone had discovered the breach. "Move," Daniel shouted, grabbing Karoline's arm and pulling her toward the exit. They regrouped with Alex and Mia in the hallway, their faces pale with panic. Guards were already converging on their position, shouting orders and brandishing weapons. Thinking quickly, Daniel pushed Karoline, Alex, and Mia toward a nearby stairwell. "I'll hold them off," he said firmly. "Get out of here and make sure the world knows what Crestwood's been doing." "No," Karoline protested, tears welling in her eyes. "We're not leaving you." "You don't have a choice," Daniel snapped, shoving them forward. "Go!" Reluctantly, they obeyed, sprinting down the stairs and bursting through the service door just as the guards reached the top floor. Outside, they didn't stop running until they reached the car, their lungs burning and hearts pounding. As they sped away, Karoline glanced back at the building, guilt and grief washing over her. Daniel had sacrificed himself to buy them time, and now it was up to them to honor his bravery. Clutching the documents tightly, she made a silent vow. No matter what happened next, Crestwood would pay for what they'd done. Part 2. The next morning, Karoline woke up with a sense of determination she hadn't felt in years. The events of the previous night lingered in her mind like an unsolved riddle. She replayed every detail, the mix-up with her seat, the sudden firings, Ethan's cryptic warning. Something wasn't right, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was closer to uncovering it than anyone else. After pouring herself a cup of coffee, she sat down at her kitchen table and opened her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she thought about where to start. Investigative journalism was her strength, but this case felt different. It wasn't just about finding answers anymore. It was about staying one step ahead of whoever was pulling the strings. She decided to reach out to someone who might understand the world of secrets and cover-ups better than she did. Alex Carter was a tech-savvy blogger known for exposing corporate scandals. His website, Behind the Curtain, had gained a loyal following for its deep dives into corruption and conspiracy theories. Though they'd never met in person, Karoline had exchanged emails with him once or twice when their paths crossed during research. She typed out a quick message, summarizing what had happened at the event and attaching screenshots of Crestwood Associates' sparse website. "I think there's more to this than meets the eye," she wrote. "Can we talk?" Within an hour, Alex replied, "Sounds intriguing. Call me." Karoline picked up her phone and dialed his number. After a brief introduction, she launched into her story, leaving out no details. Alex listened intently, occasionally interjecting with questions. When she finished, he let out a low whistle. "This isn't just some random seating mishap," he said. "Someone went to great lengths to make sure you weren't in that VIP section. And the mass firings, that's extreme even by corporate standards. What do you think is going on?" Karoline asked, leaning forward in her chair. "I don't know yet, but my gut says it's tied to Crestwood. They're not exactly famous, but they've got connections everywhere. If I were you, I'd start digging deeper into their operations and fast." Over the next few days, Karoline threw herself into the investigation. She scoured social media for mentions of Crestwood Associates, read through old news articles, and even tried reaching out to former employees listed on LinkedIn. Most ignored her messages, but one name caught her attention: Rachel Monroe. According to her profile, Rachel had worked as an event coordinator for Crestwood before leaving under mysterious circumstances. Karoline sent her a polite email explaining her situation and asking if they could meet. To her surprise, Rachel agreed. They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe downtown later that week. When Karoline arrived, she spotted Rachel immediately. She was a petite woman in her early 30s with curly brown hair and sharp green eyes. There was a nervous energy about her, as though she expected trouble to follow her wherever she went. "Thanks for meeting me," Karoline said, sliding into the seat across from Rachel. "I know this must be awkward." Rachel nodded, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "It's fine. Honestly, I'm kind of relieved someone's finally asking questions. What happened at that event last night? It wasn't an isolated incident. What do you mean? Rachel hesitated, glancing around the cafe to ensure no one was listening. Crestwood has a reputation for, well, making problems disappear, whether it's smoothing over PR disasters or rearranging seating charts to keep certain people away from others. They'll do whatever it takes to protect their clients. Who are these clients? Karoline impressed. That's the thing. I don't know all the names. But they're powerful. Politicians, CEOs, billionaires. People who can afford to pay top dollar for discretion. Rachel paused, biting her lip. Before I left, I heard rumors about a project called Operation Spotlight. Supposedly, it involved manipulating public perception during major events, like planting influencers in key seats or timing speeches to coincide with trending hashtags. It sounded crazy at first, but after seeing how things operate behind the scenes, Karoline leaned back in her chair, processing what she'd just heard. If Rachel was telling the truth, then Crestwood wasn't just a consulting firm. They were architects of reality, shaping narratives without anyone realizing it. But why target her specifically? Was it personal, or was she simply collateral? Damage. As if reading her thoughts, Rachel added, "You weren't supposed to notice, most people wouldn't have. But because you're a journalist, and a good one at that, you started asking questions, and that scared them." The conversation ended shortly after, with Rachel promising to send over any documents she still had from her time at Crestwood. As Karoline walked home, her mind raced with possibilities. If Crestwood really was orchestrating covert operations, then exposing them could blow the lid off one of the biggest scandals of the decade. But the deeper she dug, the more uneasy she became. Strange things began happening almost immediately. Her phone glitched constantly, displaying cryptic messages like "stop digging" or random strings of numbers. At first, she dismissed it as a technical issue, but when her laptop froze mid-research and rebooted to show a blank screen with the words, "We see you," she knew it wasn't coincidence. Alex noticed her growing anxiety during their daily check-ins. "You need to be careful," he warned. "If Crestwood's as dangerous as Rachel says, they won't hesitate to silence anyone getting too close." "I can't stop now," Karoline replied firmly. "Not when I'm this close." Despite the warnings, she continued her investigation, determined to uncover the truth. One evening, while reviewing notes at her desk, she received another anonymous message, this time via email. The subject line read, "For your own safety." Attached was a photo of her walking home from the cafe earlier that day, taken from an angle that suggested someone had been following her. Her hands trembled as she stared at the image. Whoever was behind this wasn't playing games. They wanted her to back off, but instead, they'd only made her more resolute. She forwarded the email to Alex, who promised to analyze it for clues. "This is serious," he told her later that night. "They're watching you, Karoline. You need backup." He suggested reaching out to Daniel Hayes, a retired investigative reporter known for his work uncovering government conspiracies. Though skeptical at first, Daniel agreed to meet with Karoline after hearing her story. Over lunch the following day, he listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes in a worn leather notebook. "You're dealing with pros," he said when she finished. "People who've spent years perfecting the art of manipulation. If you want to take them down, you'll need help." By the end of their meeting, Daniel had offered his assistance, along with a list of contacts who might prove useful. Among them was Mia Rodriguez, a hacker who ran an underground network dedicated to exposing corporate corruption. With Daniel's blessing, Karoline reached out to Mia, hoping she could shed light on Crestwood's digital footprint. Mia responded quickly, agreeing to meet later that week. In the meantime, Karoline focused on piecing together everything she'd learned so far. The picture was starting to come into focus, but the stakes were higher than ever. Every step forward felt like stepping onto thin ice, unsure of when it might crack beneath her feet. One night, as she reviewed files late in her apartment, she heard a faint clicking sound outside her door. Her heart skipped a beat. Slowly, she grabbed her phone and texted Alex. "Someone's here." Seconds later, Her phone buzzed with his reply. "Stay safe, I'm calling the cops." The car screeched to a halt in an empty parking lot miles away from Crestwood's headquarters. Karoline, Alex, and Mia sat in stunned silence, their breathing heavy and uneven. The adrenaline that had fueled their escape was fading, leaving behind a hollow ache. Daniel's sacrifice weighed heavily on all of them, but for Karoline it felt like a physical blow. She stared at the documents clutched in her hands, her knuckles white from gripping them so tightly. "What do we do now?" Alex asked, breaking the silence. His voice was low, almost hesitant, as though speaking too loudly might bring the guards chasing after them. "We release the story," Karoline said firmly. Her voice trembled slightly, but there was no mistaking the resolve behind her words. "Daniel gave us a chance to expose Crestwood. We can't let his sacrifice be for nothing." Mia nodded, opening her laptop on the dashboard. "I'll start uploading the files to secure servers. If we spread the data across multiple platforms, it'll be harder for them to erase everything." "Good idea," Alex said. "But we need more than just raw data. People won't understand what they're looking at unless we explain it clearly. Karoline, you're the journalist. Write the article. Tell the world exactly what Crestwood has been doing and why it matters." Karoline took a deep breath, nodding slowly. "Okay, I'll write it tonight. But we need to stay off the grid until we're ready to publish. They'll be watching us." With that, they agreed to split up temporarily. Mia would handle the technical side, ensuring the evidence was safe and accessible. Alex would monitor news outlets and social media for any sign of retaliation from Crestwood. And Karoline would focus on crafting the story of a lifetime, a story that could change everything. Back at her apartment, Karoline sat alone at her desk, staring at a blank Word document. The weight of the task ahead pressed down on her, but she pushed through it. This wasn't just about journalism anymore. It was about justice. For Daniel, for Rachel, for everyone who had been silenced or manipulated by Crestwood. She began typing, starting with the events of the political event where it all began. She described how she'd been removed from the VIP section, how the staff had been fired without explanation, and how her curiosity had led her to uncover a conspiracy far bigger than she'd imagined. From there, she laid out the details of Operation Spotlight, explaining how Crestwood used advanced algorithms and psychological profiling to manipulate public perception. She included quotes from Rachel Monroe and excerpts from the documents they'd recovered during their raid on the headquarters. As the hours passed, the story took shape. By dawn, Karoline had written over 5,000 words detailing every aspect of Crestwood's operation. It was clear, concise, and damning. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair, exhausted but satisfied. This was it, the moment they'd been working toward. She sent the draft to Alex and Mia for review. Within minutes, Alex called her. "It's perfect," he said, his voice filled with awe. "This is going to blow the lid off everything." "Let's hope so," Karoline replied. "Are you ready to publish?" "Almost. Mia's finishing up the uploads now. Once the files are live, we'll hit send on your article. Every major news outlet will have access within minutes." By midday, the story broke. Headlines erupted across every major platform. Crestwood Associates exposed, the shadowy firm manipulating public opinion. Inside Operation Spotlight, how powerful elites rewrite reality. Exclusive investigation uncovers mass manipulation scheme. Journalists scrambled to verify the claims, but the sheer volume of evidence made denial impossible. Social media exploded with outrage. Hashtags like Geared Expose Crestwood and NAR's Operation Spotlight trended worldwide. Politicians demanded investigations, while celebrities and influencers spoke out against the manipulation of public narratives. Even Michelle Obama released a statement condemning the unethical practices described in Karoline's report. For the first time in weeks, Karoline allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was enough to stop Crestwood. Maybe the truth really could set people free. But as the day wore on, cracks began to appear in the facade of victory. News outlets started receiving threats, warning them to retract their stories or face consequences. Several reporters who had covered the scandal were suddenly fired under mysterious circumstances. Then, late that evening, Alex called Karoline with alarming news. "They've hacked into our servers," he said, his voice tight with panic. "They're deleting the files as we speak." "What? How is that possible?" Karoline asked, her heart sinking. "They must have traced the uploads back to Mia's laptop. She's trying to block them, but they're moving fast. We might lose everything." Karoline clenched her fists, frustration bubbling inside her. Just when they thought they'd won, Crestwood was fighting back, and winning. "Is there anything we can do?" "There's one last option," Alex said grimly. "We release the location of Crestwood's headquarters. If protesters show up en masse, it'll force the authorities to act. They won't risk exposing themselves further by attacking civilians." It was a risky move, but they didn't have much choice. Karoline updated her article with the address of the building and instructions for readers to gather peacefully outside. Within hours, thousands of people descended on the area, chanting slogans and holding signs demanding accountability. The police arrived shortly after, followed by federal agents. Reporters swarmed the scene, broadcasting live updates as investigators stormed the building. Inside, they found mountains of incriminating evidence: hard drives, paper trails, and even recordings of meetings where executives discussed their plans in detail. One by one, key figures within Crestwood were arrested. Their clients, many of whom were high-profile politicians and billionaires, scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. Lawsuits poured in from victims of Crestwood's manipulations, and calls for reform echoed throughout the nation. Despite the apparent victory, Karoline couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. As she watched clips of the arrests on TV, her eyes landed on Susan Harper, the woman who had taken her seat at the political event. Susan stood near the edge of the crowd, her expression calm and unreadable. Something about her demeanor sent a chill down Karoline's spine. Later that night, as she prepared for bed, her phone buzzed with a new message. On the screen were 2 words: "We're watching." Before she could react, the screen went black. Karoline stared at her darkened phone screen, her heart pounding. The message, "We're watching," lingered in her mind like a shadow she couldn't shake. She tried turning the phone back on, but it remained unresponsive, as if something inside had been fried. Her hands trembled as she set it down on the table and backed away. This wasn't over. Despite the arrests, despite the public outrage, Crestwood's reach was deeper than anyone had imagined. Susan Harper's face flashed in her memory again, the calm confidence, the calculated smile. It was clear now that Crestwood wasn't just one company. It was part of something bigger, something unseen, but always present. Alex arrived at her apartment an hour later, looking pale and out of breath. "Mia's gone," he said without preamble. "I went to check on her this morning, and her place was empty. No signs of a struggle, but her laptop is missing." "What about the files?" Karoline asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "She must have wiped them before they got to her," Alex replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "But I don't think we're dealing with amateurs here. Whoever took her knew exactly what they were doing." Karoline sank onto the couch, her mind racing. They had exposed Crestwood, or so they thought, but instead of dismantling the operation, they might have only scratched the surface. If Susan Harper was involved, and Karoline was certain she was, then the real power players were still out there, pulling strings from behind the scenes. "We need to find out who's above Crestwood," Karoline said finally. "There has to be someone giving the orders." "That's easier said than done," Alex muttered. "Crestwood's executives aren't talking, and their clients are lawyering up. Without more evidence, we're stuck." "No, we're not," Karoline said firmly. "If Crestwood is just a piece of the puzzle, then we need to look at the bigger picture. Who benefits the most from manipulating public perception? Who gains when governments fall, economies shift, or wars start?" Alex frowned, considering her words. "You think it's global? Like international conspiracy-level stuff?" "I think it's worse than that," Karoline admitted. "What if it's not just about money or politics? What if it's about control, total, absolute control over how people think and act? The idea was terrifying, but it made sense. Every move Crestwood had made seemed designed to steer humanity in a specific direction, shaping opinions and decisions without anyone realizing it. And if Susan Harper was part of that plan, then she was far more dangerous than she appeared. Over the next few days, Karoline and Alex worked tirelessly to connect the dots. They combed through old news articles, financial records, and leaked documents, searching for any mention of Susan Harper or others like her. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. Susan wasn't just a wealthy donor or socialite. She was tied to several organizations that specialized in psychological research, media manipulation, and even artificial intelligence development. One name kept appearing: Nexus Global Initiative. At first glance, it seemed harmless, a non-profit dedicated to advancing human progress through technology and innovation. But the deeper they dug, the more sinister it became. Nexus funded projects related to behavioral psychology, data mining, and predictive modeling, all under the guise of improving society. Its board members included some of the wealthiest and most influential people in the world, including Susan Harper. "This is it," Karoline said one night as she pored over a list of Nexus's funding recipients. "Nexus isn't just a charity. It's the brain behind everything. Crestwood was just one of their tools." "But why?" Alex asked, rubbing his temples. "Why go to such lengths to manipulate people? What's the end game?" Karoline hesitated, her thoughts swirling. "Control," she said finally. "They want to control us, all of us. Not just governments or corporations, but individuals. How we think, what we believe, who we trust. If they can predict our behavior, they can shape the future however they want. And they've been doing this for years," Alex added grimly. "Decades, maybe. That's why no one noticed until now." Determined to expose Nexus, Karoline and Alex reached out to Daniel's contacts once again. Many were reluctant to help, fearing retaliation, but a few agreed to share information anonymously. One whistleblower, a former employee of Nexus named Laura, provided a crucial lead. She revealed that Nexus was planning a major event in Geneva, Switzerland, where world leaders would gather to discuss climate change and economic reform. On the surface, it sounded like a noble cause, but Laura claimed it was a front for something much darker. "They're going to use the summit to push an agenda," Laura explained during a video call. "It's subtle, nothing anyone will notice right away, but it'll lock countries into policies that benefit Nexus's long-term goals. Once those agreements are signed, there's no going back." "How do you know this?" Karoline asked. "Because I helped write the proposals," Laura admitted. "At the time, I thought I was making the world a better place, but then I started seeing the bigger picture, and, well, let's just say I got out while I still could." With this new information, Karoline and Alex devised a plan. They couldn't stop the summit outright, but they could warn the attendees and expose Nexus's true intentions. Using encrypted channels, they sent anonymous tips to journalists, activists, and government officials attending the event. The goal was simple: create enough noise to derail Nexus's plans. The day of the summit arrived, and chaos erupted almost immediately. Protesters gathered outside the conference center, holding signs and chanting slogans about corporate greed and manipulation. Inside, delegates argued fiercely over leaked documents detailing Nexus's involvement in covert operations. Reporters swarmed the scene, demanding answers from organizers and participants alike. As cameras rolled and tensions mounted, Karoline watched the coverage unfold on TV. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they'd succeeded in slowing Nexus down. But then her phone buzzed again. Somehow it had come back to life, its screen glowing softly in the dim light. Another message appeared. "You can't win." Before she could react, the screen went black once more. Weeks passed and life seemed to return to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after exposing a shadowy cabal bent on controlling the world. Crestwood was officially dissolved, its executives facing trial. Nexus denied all allegations, claiming the accusations were baseless and politically motivated. Public interest waned as new scandals captured headlines. Yet Karoline couldn't shake the feeling that Nexus was still out there, waiting, watching. She continued writing stories about corruption and manipulation, hoping to keep the conversation alive. But every time she looked over her shoulder, she half expected to see Susan Harper standing there, smiling faintly. One evening, as she walked home from the office, a man approached her on the street. He wore a nondescript suit and carried a briefcase. "Ms. Leavitt," he said calmly, "you've done impressive work, but you should know, there are forces at play you don't understand. Forces you can't fight." "Who are you?" Karoline demanded, her voice steady despite the fear creeping into her chest. He smiled faintly. "Let's just say I represent interests. Interests that value stability above all else. Keep digging and you'll find yourself in over your head." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Karoline stood frozen, her mind racing. This wasn't a warning. It was a threat. Nexus wasn't defeated. It had merely retreated, regrouping and adapting. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. And Karoline knew she wouldn't stop fighting no matter the cost.